So hello everybody, this is Bhante Joe here, and just here at Colonel Danforth Park, August, Friday, I'm not sure the date, and just thought we could do usual meditation and quick talk today. So we can start off by doing a little meditation, so we can look about 3 feet in front of us and close our eyes. And can focus in on the breath. Can know when it's coming in. And know when it's going out. If we breathe in a long breath, can just know I'm breathing in a long breath. And if we breathe in a short breath, can just know I'm breathing in a short breath. And can just pose the question in the mind, what would be a really comfortable way to breathe right now? And can just let the body respond on its own. And from that comfortable place, can let breath energy expand and the feeling of comfort expand until it fills one's whole body. And one of the metaphors they give for this in the canon is like a lake with an underground source. And the water comes up from the underground source and fills the whole lake. In the same way, can let awareness expand from that spot where it felt really comfortable to breathe until it fills the whole body. And with awareness filling the whole body, can practice whole body breathing. And when one's practicing whole body breathing, can be helpful to change perception of the breath so that it's not just air that's being pulled in and out of the lungs, but it's a kind of energy that's all around and coursing through the body. And it's possible for one to pull it into and out of any part of the body one likes. And through every pore in the body. Almost like the body was a big sponge. So on the in-breath, one can think whole body. On the out-breath, whole body. Okay, and before finishing meditation, it can be helpful to think back over the last session here and can just ask ourselves, what did we try that might have worked well? And what did we try that might not have worked so well? And then we can try to do what worked well again next time and see if we get the same results. And this is one of the ways that can learn about cause and effect in our meditation practice and can learn to develop it as a skill. Okay, so we can open our eyes and do a little bit of reflection on the Dhamma. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ saranang gacchāmi, Dhammāṃ saranang gacchāmi, Sanghaṃ saranang gacchāmi. Dutiyampi Buddhaṃ saranang gacchāmi, Dutiyampi Dhammāṃ saranang gacchāmi, Dutiyampi Sanghaṃ saranang gacchāmi. Tatiyampi Buddhaṃ saranang gacchāmi, Tatiyampi Dhammāṃ saranang gacchāmi, Tatiyampi Sanghaṃ saranang gacchāmi. So, hello everybody. Hope that you're having a great day today. It's a nice evening out here in Colonel Danforth Park with the sun just setting behind the trees over here. And it's really nice to have these places here, this park. Say this almost every video. And these are things that these natural places in the city are things that come about on their own. But there are also things that come about through the efforts of actually many people. So actually this trail kind of leading down to the park and the trails around it, they're all kind of kept up by workers for the City of Toronto. And the people who work for the City of Toronto, they're kind of paid through taxes that are done through the administration of the of the city with property taxes and maybe partially, I don't know how the funding works, maybe also through the province with some provincial income taxes. And so these through these kind of things, and there's people who work to get these taxes set up and people who work in the government to keep the whole thing going. And through these kind of things, we end up with this kind of this beautifully maintained space, even out here in the middle of the city. And actually, a lot of the things that come into our lives are kind of like this. You know, they're actually the fruit of the fruit of the labors of many different people, many different beings. And so, just thinking about it, I remember was doing a history, or kind of looking back at some photos of my personal family immigrated to Canada in the late 20s. And back then, Canada was a kind of a different place. You know, it was not a wealthy country so much, maybe relatively then. But the people then, they lived kind of a harsh life. You know, they had to heat their homes with wood in the winter, and had to go out and saw firewood in the bush. And back then, there wasn't all these cities. There was a kind of a huge uncut trees. They call kind of a uncut to untouched forest, And these trees were huge, kind of many, many feet in diameter. And they had to use a huge two-handled saw to cut them, And this generation had to labor kind of quite a bit. Basically, their whole life was labor. And they didn't have the kind of social safety net that's in Canada now. Didn't have kind of same hospital system maybe that we had now. Actually, I think universal healthcare came to Canada, much later on. Maybe in the somebody in the comments might know, maybe 60s or something like that. And also didn't have the same kind of things like food banks or anything like this. It was basically people and their families had to grow things in their garden and work at whatever jobs they could get to survive. And then, of course, in the 30s, the Great Depression came, and so they had to basically really kind of take whatever jobs they wanted. And so this was a generation that worked quite hard, kind of put forth quite a lot of effort to build things. And then, of course, succeeding generation after that, they took what that generation had built and built upon that. And kind of, from that, then technology started to evolve. In the 70s, we ended up with maybe first rudimentary computers. 80s, I think the 80s, they started going a bit more full-blown with Macs and all these things. And, the previous generations had also invented automobiles and, telephones and all these things, which succeeding generations then used to build on that, And so now in this generation, we have kind of internet phones, and you can record a video in the middle of a forest with just a cell phone, and that's kind of all the equipment you need. And so this is the way it is, kind of things build up like this, kind of step by step with the efforts of many people, And society kind of is supported through the efforts of many people. And in the same way, the Buddha has us reflect on the fact that when societies grow like this, when they're prosperous like this, when there's no wars, when there's no famines, when there's lots of food, things that have come about through the efforts of all these things that have arisen like this, then this is a good time to practice. It's a good time to be alive. It's a good time to encounter the Buddha's teachings. Because, of course, it's not always like this, right? Go back 3 or 4 generations, and, there was world wars, right? And kind of go back before that, it might not always have been the best, And so this time that we have right now, actually the world, there's always wars going on, this kind of thing, which is tragic, but is relatively, compared to previous times in history, relatively peaceful. Also kind of relatively prosperous. Many people around the world enjoying much higher standards of living, much lower mortality than ever before. People able to travel freely between countries much more than at most times in history before. And so this is a time when Buddhism has spread to the West. It's spread to kind of English-speaking countries, and it's an opportune time. It's a ripe time to practice, Because right now we have the resources to do this. Food is plentiful. There's enough food to get by on. Most monasteries and temples for lay people practicing at home. There's lots of food resources there. People also don't have to kind of labor dawn till dusk on the farm. There's time that can be put into practice, And so it's a good time, It's a good time to be around. It's a good time to be alive. And of course, the Buddha also has us reflect these good times. They arise through causes and conditions. They come about through causes and conditions. The prosperity that we have now has arisen from the efforts of all these different generations that came before us. It's built up by that, and it's sustained by conditions that have come together and are present right now. It's sustained by kind of relatively peaceful international community. It's sustained by very advanced trade networks. It's sustained by very advanced technological connections like fiber optic cables and things like this that go under the ocean, and satellites. And all these things come into being from causes and conditions, but the thing about them is that they can also cease from those same causes and conditions. There's been actually many generations since there's been a Great Depression. It's been a few generations since there's been a terrible World War, and all these things are excellent. What the Buddha actually has us reflect on is that we live in a really good time right now, so what we want to do is reinvest this opportunity in something that's even greater. So he actually has us reflect on what's called the future danger, which is that although things are good right now, times are good right now, times are peaceful right now, in the future, at some point, there'll be a breakout of war. In the future, at some point, there'll be a famine. In the future, at some point, monks might take to fighting, or might be a schism, In the future, at some point, we ourselves, right now, people are either young or old, but we ourselves will get to a stage, an age in life where it becomes very difficult to practice, But right now, when all these conditions are present such that we can practice, then we reflect in this way so that we learn to use the opportunity. So I remember when I was young, there was this story about the kind of ant and the grasshopper. And during the summer, the ant is busy, kind of collecting food and all these things because they know the winter's coming. But the grasshopper kind of, plays around and hops and all these things. And when winter comes, they don't do so well, The thing is, we don't have to spend our whole time worrying about the winter, worrying about the fact that in the future there may be war, in the future there may be famine, in the future I'm going to get old or I'm going to get sick. But what we can do is recognize that right now these things are going to happen, so right now we have the opportunity to prepare for them. We have the opportunity to practice the Buddha's teachings. We have the opportunity to practice the Dhamma. We have the opportunity to develop our mind so that when unfortunate circumstances touch our lives, when unfortunate circumstances touch our minds remain less affected because they've already found a refuge. It's already built. There's already a refuge inside for us. That we don't have to worry about losing so much. When we have our refuge in these external things, we have a lot of prosperity in society. We just go out to enjoy good food, enjoy good drink, and enjoy good times with friends, all these different things, it's not, drinking alcohol is against the Buddhist precepts, but it's not terrible to hang around with friends or anything like that. The difference is when we have this as our only refuge and we think that winter will never come, right? We think we'll never get old. Well, we don't necessarily think that as a theory, but it's something that's out of our minds, right? We kind of act, we'll never get old, we'll never die. This society will always be more and more stable, more and more prosperous. And then, of course, when these things change, if all we have as our refuge is good food, good drink, good times with friends, and get used to living in a situation that's very comfortable, very easy, then when that changes, we suffer all the more. So the Buddha instructs us to use this opportunity we have when there's peace in society, when there's lots of food, when there's ample amounts of good drinking water, when there's peace between the nations. This is the time that we reflect, I'm very lucky to be alive here, Now let me use this opportunity to cultivate my mind, to develop something that's even better than good food, even better than good drink, that's even better than kind of taking refuge in friendships, in society. Because all these things are subject more or less to change. So when things outside of us change, if we're attached to those things, if we have those as our refuge, and we suffer. So we learn to build this up. We learn to think to ourselves, all these things are going to change. Right now I'm lucky. Let me use this opportunity. And this gives rise to a sense of urgency. It gives rise to a sense like, I've got to do this right now. And of course that leads to what they call the putting forth of effort. And when we put forth effort in our practice, when we continuously do this, we continuously practice meditation, we learn wherever we are to try to continuously cultivate good qualities in our mind, then what we start to have is a happiness that comes from those things. We start to get results from those things. And when we get results from those things, it can give us confidence that we're walking the right path, which leads us to go even further. And of course, we practice in this way to get a kind of refuge in our mind, but ultimately as we go forward, what we learn is that even the mind, even these kind of wholesome feelings that arise in the mind, even the pleasant feelings that arise from meditation, these too are subject to change. These too are subject to arising and ceasing. So what the Buddha instructs us to look for in that case is to find a way out, to try to find a way out from the entire cycle, from the entire kind of what they call samsaric journey, from the entire process of being born and dying, from getting things and losing them. And this is the ultimate aim of the Buddha's teachings, to go completely beyond, to find something that's truly and permanently safe. But it starts right here like this. It can start right here like this with reflecting. This is a good time to be alive. Things are prosperous and peaceful. And I'm going to try to use this time that I have right now to develop wholesome qualities. I'm going to try to use this time that I have right now to develop my mind, to develop my faculties of wisdom, to try to develop energy, to try to develop mindfulness, to try to develop all the things that will give me a better sense of refuge when these other things, these things external to myself, start to fall away. In case there's a war in society or a famine, or I lose family or friends, I'll still have this ability to practice. And then, of course, as we continue to practice, what tends to happen is that the teachers instruct us to look for even the inconstancy in our practice itself, even in the results of our practice. These things come about from me striving. These things come about from me putting in conditions into place. So therefore, is there something that isn't conditioned? Is there something that isn't brought about by me putting these things into place? And this leads us for a desire to find something that's truly safe, which is the Buddha's instruction to all of us, is his hope for all of us, that we find this kind of true place of safety, which is Nibbana. Okay, so I think I'll leave that for everybody's reflection today. Those are just some thoughts on a kind of a nice day in a nice park, in a nice city, in a nice country, and in a relatively peaceful world, to use these conditions for going forward and for finding a true happiness which doesn't change.